A billionaire's paralyzed daughter sat alone every day, her fortune unable to buy her a single friend. Then a little boy from the wrong side of the tracks said 3 words that changed everything. What he did next will bring you to tears. What's the one thing money can't buy? Let us know in the comments and prepare for a story that will restore your faith in humanity. Alistair Vance commanded a world built of glass and steel, a kingdom that stretched across 57 floors of a Manhattan skyscraper. From his corner office, the city was a scale model, a collection of assets and liabilities he could manipulate with a single phone call. His suit was armor, tailored to perfection. His watch was a monument to precision, each tick a reminder that time was a commodity he owned. He was an emperor, absolute and isolated, his heart sealed in the same cold, impenetrable material as his tower. His empire was his fortress, built to keep the world out, especially the world of feeling, of memory, of the screeching tires and shattering glass that had stolen his wife, Amelia, and shattered his daughter's spine 5 years ago. His daughter, Lily. She was the one part of his life he couldn't control, a living testament to his failure. At 9 years old, she was a ghost in their cavernous penthouse, a silent, fragile creature confined to a state-of-the-art wheelchair that cost more than a luxury car. He provided everything for her, the best nurses, the most renowned physical therapists, a room filled with every toy a child could desire. He gave her everything except himself. He couldn't bear to look into her eyes, Amelia's eyes, and see the reflection of his own powerlessness. The silence between them was a chasm, deep and suffocating. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, her nurse, a stern but efficient woman named Helen, would take Lily to a private manicured garden adjacent to their building. It was part of the routine, a box to be checked on the daily schedule. Alistair sometimes watched from his office window, the 2 figures 100 feet below, looking like tiny, lonely chess pieces. Lily never moved, never spoke. Other children from the building, children of other emperors, would sometimes be there, running and laughing, their voices faint echoes of a life Lily would never know. They never approached her. She was an invisible princess trapped in a silver chariot. Today, however, something was different. From his perch, Alistair saw a new piece on the board. A small boy, dressed in clothes that were clean but visibly worn, had slipped through an unlocked service gate. He had a scuffed soccer ball tucked under his arm. He wasn't one of theirs. Alistair's hand instinctively went to the intercom to call security, an intruder in his sanitized world, an imperfection. But he paused. The boy wasn't causing trouble. He just stood there, watching Lily from a distance. Nurse Helen was on her phone, her back turned for a moment. The boy took a hesitant step forward, then another. He stopped a few feet from Lily's wheelchair. Alistair's heart, a dormant, useless organ, gave a strange, unfamiliar thump. He couldn't hear them, but he could see the boy's mouth move. He saw Lily's head, which was usually bowed, lift a fraction of an inch. The boy knelt down, placing his soccer ball on the pristine grass. He looked directly at Lily, his expression open and unpitying. He spoke again. And then he did something that shattered Alistair's carefully constructed reality. The boy gently rolled the ball toward the silent, unmoving girl. It stopped just short of her wheelchair's front wheels. He pointed at the ball, then at himself, then back at her, a simple, universal invitation. Alistair watched, his breath caught in his throat. He expected nothing. He always expected nothing. But then he saw it. A flicker. Lily's hand, the one that hadn't voluntarily moved in years, twitched on the armrest. Her fingers, thin and pale, uncurled slightly. It was a minuscule movement, a tremor, but to Alistair, watching through the pristine glass of his office, it was an earthquake. The boy smiled, a wide, gap-toothed grin. He picked up the ball and rolled it again. "Let's play," he mouthed, and this time Alistair could almost hear the words through the thick, soundproof window. Lily's head lifted fully, her eyes, which were always vacant, cloudy with a grief too heavy for a child to carry, focused on the boy. A sound, faint and fragile, escaped her lips. It wasn't a word, but it was more than the silence Alistair was used to. It was the beginning of a sound. Nurse Helen finally noticed. Snapping her head around, she marched toward the boy, her face a mask of disapproval, ready to eject the intruder. But Alistair was already moving. He slammed the intercom button. "Security, stand down. Do not approach the garden. Do not touch that boy." His voice was rough, unfamiliar to his own ears. He strode out of his office, past his stunned assistant, and stabbed the button for the private elevator. The smooth, silent descent felt agonizingly slow. His world, once so ordered and predictable, had been fractured by a poor kid with a scuffed soccer ball. For the first time in 5 years, something had reached his daughter, and Alistair Vance, the man who controlled everything, had no idea what to do. The only thought in his head, a thought that hammered with the force of a revelation, was, "I need to know who that boy is." His entire empire suddenly felt as fragile as a pane of glass. The elevator doors opened onto the ground floor, and Alistair strode through the marble lobby, his polished shoes clicking in urgent rhythm. He didn't stop at the main entrance, but pushed through a side door that led to the private garden. The air was cool, smelling of damp earth and clipped boxwoods. He saw them. Nurse Helen was hovering, her arms crossed, a sentry at her post. The boy was sitting cross-legged on the grass, patiently rolling the ball back and forth, not to Lily, but just near her, a persistent, gentle offering. Lily was watching him. Her focus was absolute. She wasn't looking at the flowers or the sky or the imposing figure of her father now striding across the lawn. She was looking at the boy. "What is going on here?" Alistair's voice was a low growl, aimed at the nurse. Helen jumped. "Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry. This boy, he just appeared. I was about to have him removed." "Don't," Alistair commanded, his eyes fixed on the scene. He approached slowly, not wanting to break the spell. The boy looked up, his eyes wide and brown, unafraid. He looked Alistair up and down, taking in the expensive suit and the severe expression, but he didn't flinch. "Hello," the boy said, his voice clear. "My name's Leo." Alistair didn't respond. He looked at his daughter. Her fingers were still slightly uncurled. Her breathing seemed less shallow. It was infinitesimal, but it was a change. He had spent millions on specialists, on therapies, on machines that were supposed to stimulate her nerves and muscles. All of it had resulted in nothing but clinical reports detailing a lack of progress. Yet this boy, in 5 minutes, had achieved more than 5 years of cutting-edge medicine. It made no sense. And anything that made no sense in Alistair's world was a problem to be solved, a variable to be controlled. His mind, trained to analyze markets and deconstruct complex financial instruments, shifted into its familiar, obsessive gear. This wasn't an emotional moment. It was a data point, an anomaly that required investigation. "Where are your parents?" Alistair asked, his tone clipped and impersonal. "My mom's at work," Leo said simply. "She's a cleaner in that building over there." He pointed to a much older, less glamorous building a block away. "I'm supposed to wait for her at the library, but I saw the garden." A cleaner, of course. The boy was from another world entirely, a world of grit and struggle that Alistair had long ago insulated himself from. "You're not supposed to be in here," Nurse Helen interjected, her voice sharp with disapproval. Alistair silenced her with a look. He knelt down, an awkward, unfamiliar motion in his stiff suit, so he was closer to Leo's level. "Why did you come over to her?" he asked, nodding toward Lily. Leo shrugged as if the answer were the most obvious thing in the world. "She looked lonely?" Lonely. The word hit Alistair like a physical blow. He had seen her as broken, as a medical case, as a tragic memory. He had never once, in all his sterile assessments, allowed himself to think of her as simply lonely. The simple, innocent wisdom of the child cut through years of his own complex denial. His obsession ignited. This wasn't just about a boy and a ball anymore. It was a clue. If Lily's condition wasn't just physical, if her emotional state could produce a physical response, what had his army of doctors missed? Or worse, what had they ignored? "I want to know everything," he muttered to himself. That night he didn't go back to his office. He went to Lily's medical suite in the penthouse, a room that looked more like a hospital wing than a bedroom. He dismissed the night nurse and locked the door. For hours he sat surrounded by towers of binders, digital files, and medical charts. He read every report, every therapist's note, every prescription record since the day of the accident. He was hunting for a mistake, a flaw in the system he had built around his daughter. He paid for the best, and the best were supposed to be flawless. But as the hours bled into dawn, a pattern began to emerge, a faint, unsettling thread. In the first 2 years, there had been a specialist, a Dr. Eris Thorne, a neuropsychologist who focused on a radical therapy combining emotional connection with physical rehabilitation. His notes were different from the others. They were filled with observations about Lily's moods, her moments of frustration, her small nonverbal attempts to communicate. He wrote about hope. Then, 3 years ago, Dr. Thorne's report stopped. A single entry in the file noted his contract was terminated. The reason cited was a shift in therapeutic strategy. He was replaced by a team that was more clinical. Their reports were colder, more focused on metrics and measurements, on the mechanics of her body. And from that point on, the notes on her emotional state all but vanished. Lily's progress, which had been slow but present in Thorne's reports, flatlined completely. Who had recommended that shift? Alistair scrolled through the digital records, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The authorization for the change in strategy, the signature on Dr. Thorne's dismissal, was not his. It was a name he saw and trusted every single day, Marcus Thorne, his COO, his best friend, Dr. Eris Thorne's brother. Alistair's blood ran cold. It couldn't be. Marcus had been his rock after the accident. He had handled everything, insulating Alistair from the painful details, including the hiring and firing of medical staff. He had said, "Let me take care of it, Alistair. You just focus on grieving." Alistair had been grateful, lost in his own fog of pain. He had willingly abdicated control. Now that abdication felt like a catastrophic error. Why would Marcus fire his own brother, a doctor who seemed to be making progress? It made no sense, unless the goal wasn't progress. Alistair pulled up his private network and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It belonged to a man named Gable, a private investigator who operated in the deepest shadows of the corporate world, a man who could find secrets buried under mountains of money and lies. "Gable," Alistair said, his voice a low whisper in the silent room, "I have a job for you. I want you to find a Dr. Eris Thorne, and I want you to dig into every single medical decision made regarding my daughter for the past 5 years. I want to know who was paid, who was fired, and why. And Gable, do it quietly. No one can know, especially not Marcus Thorne." Hanging up the phone, Alistair looked over at his daughter, sleeping peacefully in her high-tech bed. The image of Leo rolling the soccer ball flashed in his mind. The boy hadn't just offered to play. He had unknowingly handed Alistair the first thread in a conspiracy that now felt like it was wrapped around his own home. His hunt for the truth had begun, and he had a sickening feeling that it would lead him straight into the heart of a betrayal he couldn't possibly imagine. The next few days were a blur of controlled chaos. Outwardly, Alistair was the same formidable CEO. He chaired meetings, closed deals, and moved billions of dollars with his signature. But internally, he was a man possessed. Every spare moment was spent poring over the files Gable's team was digitally exhuming from encrypted hospital servers and archived financial records. He was building a second secret empire of information within his own. Gable's first report landed in Alistair's secure inbox 48 hours later. It was concise and devastating. Dr. Eris Thorne was alive and well, practicing at a small, underfunded clinic in Queens. He had been forced to sign a draconian non-disclosure agreement upon his termination from Lily's care team, legally gagging him. The reason for his dismissal, according to the official paperwork Marcus had filed, was professional misconduct. But Gable had found no evidence of any such thing. In fact, Dr. Thorne's record was impeccable. The second part of the report was the true bombshell. Gable had unearthed a payment, a single, massive, untraceable transfer of $2 million made from Advance Industries' subsidiary Shell Corporation to the lead physical therapist who replaced Dr. Thorne. The payment was made 1 week after the new therapist submitted his first report, a report that officially downgraded Lily's prognosis from potential for partial recovery to permanent and irreversible paralysis. That report had been the cornerstone of the new, less hopeful therapeutic strategy. It had been the nail in the coffin of hope. Alistair stared at the screen, the numbers and names swimming before his eyes. It was a ghost, a phantom transaction buried so deep it was never meant to be found. But it was there. Proof. Not of what exactly, but proof of a lie. Someone had paid a doctor to say his daughter would never get better, and all signs pointed back to Marcus. His first instinct was rage, a cold, clean fury that demanded confrontation. He wanted to storm into Marcus's office, throw the evidence on his desk, and watch the man who called himself a friend crumble. But he stopped himself. This was a snake in his house. You don't shout at a snake. You watch it, you learn its movements, and you wait for the perfect moment to strike. He needed more. He needed to know why. Meanwhile, the Leo problem, or rather, the Leo solution, persisted. Alistair had security discreetly ensure the service gate remained accidentally unlocked every afternoon at 3. And every afternoon, Leo would appear. He would sit with Lily, talking to her, showing her things he'd found. A shiny rock, a bird's feather, a comic book. He never pushed her to respond. He simply included her in his world. And Lily was changing. The twitch in her hand had become a definite, albeit weak, movement. She would turn her head toward Leo when he spoke. The faint sounds she made were becoming more frequent. The nurses were baffled, noting the changes in their logs with clinical surprise. They called it unexplained neural activity. Alistair called it hope. He knew he couldn't rely on a child's random visits. He needed to make this connection official to bring Leo and his world into Lily's sterile existence. He had to meet the mother. He had Gable run a background check. Sarah Jensen, a single mother, 31 years old, worked 2 cleaning jobs to make ends meet, lived in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment, no criminal record. No gold-digging lawsuits, just a long, hard history of trying to stay afloat. She was, by all accounts, a nobody in his world, which made her the most terrifying person he had to face. She had something he needed, something his money couldn't just buy, her trust. He arranged the meeting himself, foregoing his assistant. He had his driver take him to her neighborhood, a place of peeling paint and graffitied walls that stood in stark, brutal contrast to his own. He felt like an alien stepping onto a foreign planet. He found her in the small park near her building, watching Leo play on the swings. She was beautiful, but in a way that was completely foreign to him. Her beauty wasn't polished or curated. It was etched by exhaustion and resilience. When she saw him approaching, her body instantly tensed. She pulled Leo behind her, a lioness protecting her cub. Her eyes, a startlingly clear blue, were filled with suspicion. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice wary, "my son told me you spoke to him." "I did," Alistair said, feeling clumsy and out of place. The power he wielded in the boardroom was useless here. Your son has been very kind to my daughter. Leo is kind to everyone, she replied, her tone defensive. He doesn't see wheelchairs or money. He just sees people. I know. That's why I'm here. He took a deep breath. Humility was a language he barely spoke. I would like to hire your son. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Hire him? He's 7. Not to work, Alistair corrected himself quickly. I want to pay you for his time, for him to be a companion for Lily, an hour or 2 a day. At my home, I would have him picked up and dropped off. I would pay you very, very well. He saw the flicker of insult in her eyes, quickly followed by a flash of desperate calculation. He could see her mentally tallying up bills, rent, groceries. He had made a mistake, framing it in the cold language of transaction that was his native tongue. My son is not for sale, she said, her voice quiet but firm as steel. His friendship isn't something you can buy. That's not what I meant, he stammered, shocked at his own ineptitude. I want to help you, and he helps her. It seems like a solution. A solution for you, she countered. You want to use my son as therapy for your daughter. She wasn't wrong, but it was more than that. He saw the genuine bond between the 2 children. He saw the light in his daughter's eyes for the first time in half a decade. He was desperate to protect it, to nurture it. Please, he said, and the word felt raw and exposed coming from his lips. Just come to the garden tomorrow with Leo. Don't do it for money, just come and watch them together. If you still feel the same way after that, I will never bother you again. He saw the conflict on her face, the fierce pride warring with a mother's curiosity. She looked down at Leo, who was peeking out from behind her, his eyes wide. One time, she said finally. We'll come for 1 hour, then we'll see. It was a fragile truce, a thread of a chance. As Alistair walked back to his gleaming, armored car, he felt a profound shift inside him. The investigation into the conspiracy against his daughter was a matter of logic and revenge. This, however, was something else entirely. It was a negotiation for his daughter's soul. And for the first time, he realized that winning this battle would require him to tear down the very walls he had spent years building around his heart. The alliance was fragile, but it was a start. He was no longer fighting alone. The next day, precisely at 3, Sarah and Leo arrived at the service gate. Sarah's hands were clenched, her posture rigid. She looked at the perfectly manicured garden, the towering glass building, and the uniformed doorman with an expression of profound distrust. Alistair met them there, having dismissed Nurse Helen for the afternoon. He felt an uncharacteristic nervousness. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice softer than usual. Sarah just nodded, her eyes scanning everything, assessing every threat. Lily was already there, positioned in her usual spot under the shade of a Japanese maple. When she saw Leo, the change was immediate and startling. A small, eager sound escaped her lips. Her head lifted, and her eyes tracked him as he ran across the grass toward her. "Hi, Lily," Leo chirped, dropping his soccer ball at his feet. He didn't seem to notice the 2 tense adults watching his every move. He just saw his friend. Alistair guided Sarah to a stone bench a respectful distance away. "Just watch," he whispered. For the next hour they sat in silence, observing a world being built for 2. Leo didn't try to force Lily into a game she couldn't play. Instead, he adapted. He narrated a story from his comic book, doing all the voices. He lined up shiny pebbles on her wheelchair tray, explaining the special powers of each one. He lay on his back on the grass and described the shapes he saw in the clouds, asking her to just blink if she saw a dragon too. And she did. A slow, deliberate blink, a clear response. Then Leo brought out the soccer ball. "Okay, this is the best part," he announced. He sat in front of her and rolled the ball gently against the footrest of her chair. "Goal!" he yelled. "You scored 1-0, your team." He did it again. 2-0. "You're unstoppable." Sarah, who had been sitting as stiff as a statue, let out a small choked sound. Alistair turned to look at her. Her face was a mixture of amazement and dawning understanding. But it was what happened next that broke through everyone's defenses. Leo, in his make-believe game, pretended to trip and fell over in an exaggerated, clumsy heap. "Oof! You're too good for me!" he groaned from the grass. And from Lily, a sound they had not heard since before the accident. A laugh. It wasn't loud. It was airy and weak, like the rustling of dry leaves, but it was unmistakable. It was a pure, genuine, childish laugh. Alistair felt the sound pierce through him, unlocking a part of his heart that had been frozen solid for 5 years. Tears welled in his eyes, hot and shocking. He turned away, embarrassed by the sudden overwhelming flood of emotion. Beside him, he heard Sarah sniffle. When he dared to look back at her, she too was wiping tears from her face. Their shared suspicion had dissolved in the warmth of that single, miraculous sound. Sarah began, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't understand." "Neither did I," Alistair admitted, his own voice hoarse, "until your son showed me." In that moment, they were no longer a billionaire and a cleaner. They were just two parents, bound by a shared moment of grace, watching their children create a pocket of joy in a world that had given them both so much pain. The fragile truce had solidified into a fragile alliance. When the hour was up, Leo gave Lily a gentle hug around her shoulders. "See you tomorrow?" he asked. Lily responded with another one of those small, breathy sounds, her eyes shining. As Alistair walked them to the gate, the awkwardness between him and Sarah had been replaced by a quiet, shared reverence. "He can come every day," Sarah said softly. "You don't have to pay me. This is different." "I insist," Alistair said, but his tone had changed. "Not as a payment for his friendship, but because you're a mother who works 2 jobs, and if your son is helping my daughter, it's the least I can do to make your life a little easier. Please, let me do this." She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. She saw past the suit and the wealth and saw the desperate father beneath. She finally gave him a small, genuine smile. "Okay, Alistair." It was the first time she had used his name. The newfound hope, however, cast a dark shadow. The joy he felt was tainted by the cold fury of his investigation. Lily's laugh was not just a miracle, it was evidence. It was proof of a potential that someone had tried to systematically extinguish. And that someone was Marcus. His resolve hardened into granite. He would nurture this fragile new hope with one hand, and with the other he would dismantle the man who had tried to steal it. The daily visits became the anchor of their new reality. Leo would arrive, and for an hour the penthouse garden was transformed from a sterile exhibit into a real backyard. The sound of Lily's quiet laughter became more frequent. She began using a letterboard to spell out simple words, her finger movement slow and laborious, but filled with a new, fierce determination. Her progress was staggering. Alistair found himself rushing home from the office each day, not wanting to miss a moment. He'd stand by the window, not as a distant observer, but as a father watching his daughter come back to life. He started spending more time with Lily after Leo left, reading to her, talking to her about his day, sharing the silence, not as a chasm, but as a space of comfortable companionship. He was learning to be a father again. His relationship with Sarah also evolved. They would sit on the bench, talking quietly while the children played. He learned about her struggles, her dreams for Leo, her unwavering optimism in the face of relentless hardship. She learned about Amelia, about the accident, about the crushing guilt that had turned him into an emotional recluse. They were from different universes, but they found common ground in their fierce love for their children. He found himself admiring her strength, her integrity, her quiet dignity. It was a feeling he hadn't known he was capable of anymore. But this blossoming hope was a threat to someone. And the viper in the nest was beginning to stir. Marcus Thorne watched Alistair's transformation with growing alarm. He saw the light returning to his friend's eyes, the way he left board meetings early, the new focus that wasn't on quarterly reports, but on his daughter. For 5 years, Marcus had carefully managed Alistair's grief, channeling it into a single-minded obsession with the company. A broken, grieving Alistair was predictable, malleable. A hopeful, engaged Alistair was a threat to the power Marcus had so carefully consolidated. And the source of this change was a cleaner, and her son, an unacceptable, low-class variable. Marcus made his move, cloaking it in the guise of friendship and concern. He found Sarah one afternoon as she was leaving the Vance building. He was charming, his smile disarming, his suit immaculate. "Mrs. Jensen, Sarah, I'm Marcus Thorne, Alistair's colleague and friend." Sarah was immediately on guard. "I know who you are." "I just wanted to thank you on Alistair's behalf," Marcus said, his voice oozing sincerity. "What your son has done for Lily. It's a miracle. Alistair is a new man." He paused, letting the compliment land. "He feels so indebted to you. In fact, he asked me to give you this." He handed her a thick, embossed envelope. "It's a cashier's check for $250,000, enough to get you a new apartment, a new start. Alistair wanted to make sure you and your son were taken care of permanently." Sarah stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. She could feel the trap in his words. "Alistair asked me to give you this." It was a lie. She knew it instinctively. Alistair, the new Alistair she was getting to know, would never be so crass. This was a payoff, a dismissal. "And what do you want in return?" she asked, her voice cold. Marcus's smile didn't waver. "Just for you to accept his gratitude. Perhaps it would be best for everyone if you and your son moved on, find a new life. Lily is getting stronger now. She'll be starting more intensive professional therapies. It might be confusing for her to have distractions." The insult was clear. "You were a temporary fix, a tool. Now you are a distraction." Sarah's spine stiffened. She looked Marcus straight in the eye, her own gaze unflinching. "My son is not a distraction. He's her friend, and our lives are not for sale." She pushed the envelope back into his chest. "You can tell Mr. Vance that his gratitude is rejected." She turned and walked away, her heart pounding with a mixture of anger and fear. This man was powerful, and he was an enemy. Marcus watched her go, the smile finally dropping from his face. His expression turned to one of cold fury. The easy way had failed. Now he would have to be more direct. If he couldn't remove the cleaner, he would destroy her. He would turn Alistair's miracle into a weapon against him. That evening, Marcus went to Alistair's office, his face a mask of practiced concern. "Alistair, we need to talk about the Jensen woman." Alistair looked up from his work. "What about her?" "I was worried about you, about the situation," Marcus said, choosing his words carefully. "I did a little digging. It turns out she has a history of this sort of thing, targeting wealthy, vulnerable men. It was a complete fabrication, but he delivered it with utter conviction. I tried to handle it discreetly. I offered her a generous severance, a way to leave quietly. She threw it in my face. She demanded $1 million. She said if she didn't get it, she'd go to the press and invent a story." Alistair stared at him, his face unreadable. The old Alistair, the one lost in grief, would have believed him instantly. But this Alistair had been reawakened. He had sat on a park bench and listened to this woman talk about her life. He had seen the fierce, unshakable integrity in her eyes. Marcus's story didn't fit. It was a puzzle piece from the wrong box. "She demanded $1 million?" Alistair asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I know it's hard to hear," Marcus said, pressing his advantage. "She has you fooled. She's a predator, Alistair." Alistair stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the city lights. He thought of the $2 million paid to the therapist. He thought of the forged medical report. He thought of the NDA that had silenced a good doctor. Marcus thought he was playing chess with a novice, not realizing Alistair could already see the entire board. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Marcus," Alistair said, turning back, his expression a perfect mask of neutrality. "I'll handle it." Marcus left the office, confident he had planted the seed of doubt. But he had done something far worse. He had just confirmed for Alistair with absolute certainty that he was the snake. And now Alistair knew he was coming for him. The first strike had been made. The war had begun. The first public salvo came 2 days later. It was a sleek, vicious article on a popular gossip website, complete with grainy paparazzi photos of Sarah and Leo leaving Alistair's building. The headline was "Pure Poison. Grieving billionaire prey for gold-digging single mom. Sources say Alistair Vance's new friend demanded a 7-figure payout." The story was a masterpiece of insinuation, filled with anonymous quotes from concerned friends and insiders who worried that the vulnerable CEO was being taken advantage of. It painted Sarah as a calculating predator and Leo as the bait in her trap. Alistair's fury was a white-hot, silent inferno. He knew with chilling certainty that Marcus was the source. This was the story Marcus had tried to sell him, now weaponized for public consumption. The effect was immediate and brutal. Reporters began camping outside Sarah's apartment building. Her landlord, a man whose company was a minor vendor for Vance Industries, suddenly served her with an eviction notice, citing a fabricated lease violation. Her boss at her main cleaning job fired her, mumbling apologies about not wanting this kind of trouble. In less than 24 hours, Marcus had systematically dismantled Sarah's life, using Alistair's own power and influence as the weapon. He was trying to force her out, to make her life so unbearable she would have no choice but to flee. Alistair called her, his voice tight with rage. "Sarah, don't say anything. I'm coming to get you." He arrived at her apartment to find her packing boxes, her face pale but resolute. Leo was sitting on the floor trying to comfort her, his young face etched with a worry no child should have to bear. The sight of them, so strong yet so vulnerable, solidified Alistair's resolve into something unbreakable. This was no longer just about uncovering a past betrayal. It was about protecting his future. "You're not going anywhere," he said, walking into the small, cramped room. "Except with me." "Alistair, I can't," she said, her voice trembling. "Look at what's happening. I'm putting my son in danger. We have to go." "No," he said, taking her hands. "This is not your fault. This is mine. I let this happen. I let a snake into my life, and he is trying to poison everything I care about. And Sarah," he looked her directly in the eyes, "I care about you and Leo." The confession hung in the air, simple and profound. "You're moving into the penthouse, both of you," he declared. "It's the safest place for you. I'll have my security team handle the reporters and this ridiculous eviction. You are under my protection now, completely." She hesitated, her pride warring with her fear. "Please," he said, "don't do it for you. Do it for them." He nodded toward the door of the apartment, where Leo was already whispering to a picture of Lily he had drawn. "They need each other, and Huh?" He paused, the truth of it hitting him with the force of a physical blow. I need you." That night, Sarah and Leo moved into a guest suite in the penthouse that was larger than their entire apartment. The contrast was jarring, but for the first time in days, they were safe, protected within the walls of Alistair's fortress. But Alistair knew the fortress itself was compromised. The enemy was inside. The threats were escalating, growing more public, more dangerous. Marcus was no longer trying to be subtle. He was trying to burn Alistair's new world to the ground. While Sarah and the children slept, Alistair met with Gable in a secure video conference. The PI's face was grim. "It's him," Gable said without preamble. "We traced the payment to the gossip site. It came from an offshore account. It took some doing, but we cracked it. The account is funded by a series of shell corporations, but the initial seed money 5 years ago came from a transfer authorized by Marcus Thorne. Gable brought up a document on the screen, a financial flowchart, a spiderweb of deceit. And it gets worse. That same account has been making monthly payments to the lead physical therapist, the one who changed Lily's prognosis. It also made a one-time payment to Dr. Eris Thorne's former university the day after they rescinded a research grant he was counting on. Marcus didn't just fire his brother. He tried to ruin him. Alistair felt a profound soul-deep sickness. This wasn't just about power or control of the company. This was a pattern of systematic, cruel sabotage aimed at keeping Lily broken and Alistair dependent. It was a level of betrayal so monstrous it defied comprehension. "Why, Gable?" Alistair whispered, the question torn from his throat. "Why would he do this?" "I can only speculate, Alistair," Gable said. "Vance Industries has a succession clause. In the event of your incapacitation or death, your shares go into a trust for Lily. The trustee, designated by you years ago, has full voting control of the company until Lily comes of age." Alistair's blood turned to ice. He didn't need Gable to finish the sentence. He knew the name he had written on that document in the dark days after the accident, when he had trusted one man above all others. "The trustee," Alistair said, his voice a dead whisper, "is Marcus Thorne." The truth crashed down on him with the force of a physical blow. It was all there. A 5-year conspiracy laid bare in a single, horrifying motive. As long as Lily was permanently and irreversibly paralyzed, she would never be deemed competent to take control. Marcus would have indefinite control over his empire. A healthy, recovering Lily, a Lily who might one day walk and talk and think for herself, was the one thing that could take it all away from him. And Alistair, by finding hope, by bringing Leo and Sarah into their lives, had unknowingly lit a fire under Marcus's carefully constructed throne. The media attacks, the eviction, the threats, it was all the desperate flailing of a man whose long-term plan was about to go up in smoke. He leaned forward, his hands braced on his desk, the gleaming city lights outside mocking him with their brilliance. His entire world, the one he had built, the one he had trusted, was a lie. His best friend was a monster. His daughter's suffering had been a business strategy. The rage that followed was unlike anything he had ever felt. It was cold, pure, and absolute. It was the rage of a king who discovers the deepest treason in his own court. It was the rage of a father who learns his child's pain was a calculated investment. He looked up at Gable's image on the screen. "Thank you, Gable. You've given me everything I need." He ended the call and sat in the silence of his office, the documents glowing on his monitor, the spiderweb of lies, the proof. He now held the weapon that could destroy Marcus Thorne completely. The unmasking was complete. Now came the reckoning. He walked out of his office and into the main living area of the penthouse. Sarah was there, curled up on a sofa, unable to sleep. She looked up at him, her eyes full of worry. "I know everything," he said, his voice low and heavy with the weight of his discovery. He sat down opposite her, and for the next hour he told her everything. The fired doctor, the paid-for prognosis, the trust, the monstrous, suffocating reason behind it all. She listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to horror, to a deep, resonant anger on his behalf. When he finished, she didn't offer platitudes or condolences. She reached across the space between them and took his hand. Her touch was firm, grounding. "So what are you going to do?" she asked, her voice quiet but strong. "I'm going to take back my daughter's future," he said, a deadly calm settling over him, "and I'm going to burn his world to the ground." The final confrontation was set in motion by an unexpected catalyst. Dr. Eris Thorne, tracked down and finally freed from his NDA by Alistair's legal team, had reviewed Lily's latest medicals. He contacted Alistair with staggering news. There was a revolutionary experimental treatment available at a private clinic in Zurich, Switzerland. a procedure that combined neurostimulation with advanced stem cell therapy. Given Lily's recent re-engagement and neural awakening, Aris believed she was a prime candidate. He believed it could give her a chance, a real tangible chance, to walk again. The hope was blinding, a sunrise after years of night. But the surgery had to happen immediately. The window of opportunity was small. The clinic could take her in 10 days. Alistair felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. He was about to tell Sarah when an email pinged on his tablet. It was from the Vance Industries board. It was a notice for an emergency shareholder vote to approve the final stages of the largest, most complex merger in the company's history, the Apex deal. It was a $500 billion behemoth that Alistair had been working on for 2 years. It was to be his crowning achievement, the move that would make his empire truly immortal. The vote was scheduled for 10 days from now, in New York. At the exact same time, Lily's surgery was scheduled in Zurich. It was an impossible choice, engineered with malicious precision. Alistair knew instantly it was Marcus's final move. He was forcing Alistair to choose his empire or his daughter. If Alistair flew to Zurich, he would miss the vote. The Apex deal, which was already on shaky ground with a few key shareholders, would collapse without his presence and personal endorsement. The stock would plummet. The board would lose faith. Marcus, as COO and trustee-in-waiting, could easily orchestrate a vote of no confidence and seize control of the chaos. He would win. He would get the company, just as he had always planned. It was the ultimate moral gauntlet. Everything he had built versus the one thing that truly mattered. The old Alistair would have agonized. He would have tried to find a way to have both, to manipulate time and space to serve his ambition. But the man sitting in the penthouse, the man who had watched his daughter laugh for the first time in 5 years, felt no conflict at all. The choice was not a choice, it was an answer he had learned from a 7-year-old boy and a fiercely protective mother. He knew what he had to do. The confrontation couldn't wait for the day of the vote. It had to happen now, on his terms. The next morning a storm was brewing over Manhattan, the sky a bruised purple. It was a fitting backdrop. Alistair called an emergency meeting of the executive board. He told them it was regarding a critical, time-sensitive issue with the Apex deal. He requested Marcus be there 30 minutes early for a private briefing. Marcus walked into the glass-walled boardroom on the 57th floor, a confident, predatory smile on his face. He saw Alistair standing alone, looking out at the storm-darkened city. "Alistair," Marcus began, his voice smooth as oil. "Tragic news about the scheduling conflict, Zurich or the deal of a lifetime. A terrible choice for any man to have to make." Alistair turned slowly from the window. His face was a mask of ice. "There is no choice, Marcus." He gestured to the large screen on the wall. "Before the rest of the board arrives, I wanted to show you a presentation I've prepared." He clicked a button on his tablet. The screen lit up, not with financial projections, but with a bank statement, the offshore account, a multi-million-dollar balance. Marcus's smile flickered. "Alistair, what is this?" "I believe it's yours," Alistair said, his voice lethally soft. He clicked again. The flowchart from Gable appeared, a spiderweb of shell corporations all leading back to Marcus. Another click. A copy of the $2 million payment authorization to the therapist. Another, the wire transfer record to the gossip website. Marcus's face had gone white. The mask of friendship and concern was gone, replaced by the stark, ugly face of panic. This is fabricated. A smear campaign." "Is it?" Alistair's voice dropped to a whisper, yet it filled the room. "Is the sworn affidavit from Dr. Eris Thorne a fabrication? The one detailing how you threatened to destroy his career unless he walked away from my daughter's case? Is the recording of your conversation with the tabloid editor a fabrication?" He played a short audio clip. Marcus's voice, unmistakable, clear as a bell, saying, "I want you to paint her as a gold digger, make her life a living hell." The blood drained from Marcus's face. He was trapped, exposed, crucified by data and his own words. "You left my daughter in a chair, in silence, for 5 years, Alistair said, stepping closer, his voice vibrating with a rage that had been simmering for weeks. "You let me grieve a future for her that you had personally stolen. You did it so you could one day control this company, this building, this view." He gestured to the window, where lightning silently split the sky. "You tried to take everything from me, my hope, my friend, the woman I care for. You tried to destroy an innocent mother and her child to protect your lie?" Marcus staggered back, speechless. "Alistair, it was for the company, to keep you focused." "The company?" Alistair laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You know nothing about what I've built. This isn't my legacy." He pointed the tablet at Marcus, the screen showing a live feed from a camera in the penthouse. It showed Lily sitting with Sarah, the two of them working on a puzzle, Leo cheering them on. Lily was smiling. That is my legacy, my family, something you tried to poison." The doors to the boardroom swished open. The other board members filed in, their faces grim and expectant, ready for a meeting about the merger. They stopped dead, sensing the electric tension in the room. Alistair turned to face them, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "Gentlemen, the Apex deal is off. I'm killing it, effective immediately." A stunned silence filled the room. "Furthermore," Alistair continued, his eyes locking back onto Marcus, "as of this moment, Marcus Thorne is terminated from all positions at Vance Industries for gross misconduct and fraud. Security will escort you from the building. Your assets will be frozen pending the outcome of the criminal investigation I have already initiated." He tossed a thick file onto the boardroom table. "It's all in there, everything." Marcus stared at him, his face a ruin of disbelief and hatred. He opened his mouth to speak to fight, but no words came out. He was utterly, comprehensively defeated. 2 security guards entered the room and flanked him. Alistair looked at the shocked faces of his board. "I'm also announcing my resignation as CEO. I'm taking an indefinite leave of absence. My daughter has a surgery in Zurich, and I'm not going to miss it. My life's work is no longer in this room. It's with her." He strode out of the boardroom without a backward glance, leaving behind the shattered remnants of his old life and the gasping shock of his colleagues. He didn't feel loss. He felt a profound, cleansing liberation. He had faced the moral gauntlet and had not just chosen his family, he had publicly and decisively burned his empire to save them. The king was leaving his kingdom not in defeat, but in glorious, righteous victory. 1 year later, the sun streamed through the large windows of a comfortable, elegant house nestled in the Swiss countryside, overlooking Lake Geneva. The air was clean, the silence broken only by the sound of birds and distant laughter. The house was a fraction of the size of the New York penthouse, but it felt infinitely larger, filled not with expensive objects, but with warmth and life. Alistair Vance, dressed in a simple sweater and jeans, knelt on a lush green lawn. The severe lines of the CEO had softened from his face, replaced by the easy smile of a father. He was holding a soccer ball. "Ready, Lily?" he called out. A few feet away Lily stood, her hands held by Sarah. She wore light leg braces, but she was standing on her own 2 feet. The surgery had been a breathtaking success, followed by a year of intensive, grueling, but joyful rehabilitation. She was not just standing, she was taking hesitant, wobbly steps. "Ready, Daddy," she said, her voice clear and strong. With a determined look on her face, she let go of Sarah's hands and took 3 unsteady steps toward her father. She kicked the ball. It was a clumsy kick, but it rolled across the grass and bumped against Alistair's leg. "Goal!" a voice shouted. Leo, now 8 years old, ran onto the lawn, cheering wildly. Team Lily wins again! Lily beamed, a radiant, happy smile that lit up her entire face. Alistair scooped her up into a huge hug, burying his face in her hair. The feeling of her arms wrapping around his neck was a miracle he would never take for granted. Sarah walked over, her own eyes shining with happy tears. She put her arm around Alistair, and he pulled her into their embrace, a complete family unit. They had stayed in Switzerland after the surgery, leaving the wreckage of their old lives behind. Alistair had sold a controlling interest in Vance Industries, using the billions to establish a global foundation for pediatric neurological research with Dr. Eris Thorne at its helm. He had kept enough to ensure his family would want for nothing, but he had walked away from the throne without a second thought. Marcus Thorne was in prison, convicted of fraud and conspiracy. His name was a forgotten whisper. Alistair looked from Lily's triumphant face to Leo's joyful one, and then to Sarah, the woman who had taught him how to feel again, the woman he loved, with a depth and sincerity he never knew he possessed. His old kingdom had been built of glass and steel, a monument to power and isolation. His new kingdom was built of laughter, courage, and love. It was smaller, quieter, and infinitely more valuable. "What do you want to do now?" Sarah asked, her voice soft. Alistair looked at his daughter, standing on her own, and at the boy who had started it all with a simple, kind question. He looked at the love of his life, his partner in this new, beautiful world. "Let's play," he said, and his heart was finally completely whole.